welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, look, before we even crack open the file for today, I need you to do something for us. It takes 1 second.
It really does.
Hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed. Seriously, we are covering topics today that the algorithm explicitly suppresses.
Pushes way, way down.
If you want this kind of content to keep showing up in your feed, content that actually challenges the narrative, we need your support to keep the signal strong.
Absolutely. The material we're covering today is what you might call high voltage. It's the kind of stuff that gets buried on purpose. So locking in that subscription is really the only way to ensure you don't miss out.
High voltage is a polite way of putting it. We're looking at a book that is basically a piece of radioactive samizdat in the current cultural climate. It's titled, and get ready for this, because the title alone is a manifesto, Female Liberation Wage Slaves with Nightmare Lives, Sterilized and Tortured by Ideological Possession of Collectivist Satanic Communism.
It's quite the title. It doesn't exactly hide the ball, does it?
Not even a little bit. The author is Conrad Riker, and he's clearly not interested in playing nice or being politically correct.
No.
This is a deep dive for the men out there who feel like the world has gone completely off the rails and that they're the only ones noticing.
Right. If you've ever felt like the deck is stacked against you, or that Western civilization is collapsing and it's not an accident,
then this is the book you've been waiting for.
and I want to be clear right up front, we're going to do our best to summarize Riker's arguments, but this book is dense. I mean, really dense.
It is.
It combines evolutionary psychology, economic data, cultural critique. It's incredibly incisive. So if you want the full uncensored arguments, and there's a lot of nuance we just can't fit in here,
You've got to buy it.
you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy the ebook. It's available right now.
Definitely. Go check it out. But let's unpack this, because Riker's premise is bold. He isn't saying we're just in a bad economic cycle.
No, it's much deeper than that.
He is arguing that the collapse of the West is a direct result of a female-coded ideological plague. He claims that our institutions haven't just drifted left, they've been captured.
Captured by a specific mindset that is, well, hostile to man, hostile to logic, and frankly, hostile to civilization itself. He calls it institutional capture.
So break that down. What were institutions before this capture?
Riker argues that before this shift, institutions, universities, courts, corporations were based on what he calls the father archetype. They were about production.
Production.
They enforced laws, they taught objective wisdom, they built infrastructure. Their job was to maintain standards and produce results.
So meritocracy is basically, you either built the bridge correctly or you didn't. You either learned the material or you failed.
Exactly. But Riker argues that these institutions have been hijacked by a distorted mother archetype. They've shifted from producing to nurturing.
So the goal of a modern HR department or a university administration isn't excellence anymore.
No, it's to manage feelings. It's to prevent harm. Riker argues that this maternal instinct, which is biologically designed to protect vulnerable children, has gone feral.
Feral, that is a strong word. What does he mean by that?
He means it's misdirected.
Yeah.
Because birth rates are plummeting, which we'll get to later, this massive biological instinct to nurture and protect isn't being directed at actual children.
So it's projected outward.
Onto the state, onto society at large.
Yeah.
And you get a nanny state that treats grown men like infants who need to be managed, or like predators who need to be controlled.
To illustrate this, Riker introduces us to a character early in the book, Eric in Stockholm. This part really stuck with me because it felt less like a story and more like a diagnosis.
It is a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Eric is 42, unemployed, divorced, unmedicated, sitting alone in his apartment. On the surface, society looks at Eric and says, he failed.
But Riker flips that.
He flips the lens.
Yeah.
He argues Eric didn't fail. Eric was harvested. He was a stoic man who played by the old rules, worked hard, but got automated out of a job.
He was a faithful husband.
But he lost his wife to a divorce court system that Riker argues is statistically rigged against men. And he lost his kids to state rules that labeled him a risk just for being a traditional stoic father.
So Eric is the broken modern man. But the disturbing argument Riker makes is that the system actually wants Eric to be broken.
Of course. A broken man's compliant. A broken man doesn't push back.
And to ensure that compliance, you need a mechanism of control. Riker calls this gynocentrism, or the hive mind.
The idea that in this female-dominated system, loyalty to the collective consensus is more important than the objective truth.
And he breaks down exactly how this control is enforced. He uses an acronym that I think is going to ring a lot of bells for our listeners, The GSR machine.
The GSR machine: gossip, shame, and rallying.
Break that down for us, because I feel like I see this everywhere, from the office break room to Twitter.
It's the primary weapon of the hive mind. Riker argues that men, generally speaking, resolve conflict through direct confrontation or competence hierarchies. If I disagree with you, we debate, or we compete.
To see who's right.
But the female-coded strategy is social exclusion. First, gossip. You identify the target, the man who questions the narrative.
The one who won't apologize.
Second, shame. You label him. You don't argue with his facts. You attack his character. You call him toxic, misogynist, incel.
And then the third step.
Rallying. You mobilize the group to destroy his reputation.
It's not about whether the man is right or wrong. It's about whether he is compliant. If he steps out of line, the GSR machine grinds him down.
Precisely. It's an immunity system for the ideology. And Riker connects this behavior directly to the psychology of the modern left. This is where the book gets very controversial.
This is the part about BPD.
He draws a link between leftist politics and collective borderline personality disorder.
That is a heavy clinical diagnosis to apply to a political movement.
Right.
How does he justify that connection?
He looks at the behavioral patterns. BPD is characterized by splitting this, oscillation between idealization and devaluation. You see this constantly in identity politics. One minute, a man is an ally and he's idealized as a hero. The next minute, he disagrees on one minor point, and he's devalued as absolute trash.
There's no nuance. You're either a savior or a demon.
Exactly. And the engine driving this is what Riker calls weaponized victimhood.
That's the key phrase.
It is. In a production-based society, the father system, you get authority by being competent. In this mother system, you get authority by being a victim.
Crying harm gives you absolute moral authority.
Absolute. You don't need evidence. You don't need facts. You just need to say, I feel unsafe, or I'm triggered. And the entire machinery of the institution just bends to your will.
It creates a generation of people who are incentivized to be fragile. And this leads to what he calls the NPC phenomenon, non-player characters.
Right. He describes a huge portion of the population, mostly women, but increasingly male feminists, who just recite slogans.
Believe women. Toxic masculinity.
The patriarchy. They aren't thinking through these concepts. They are downloading them. Riker points to the feminist rage trend on TikTok as proof.
Oh, I've seen these women just screaming into their phones because a guy looked at them at the gym.
Billions of views. And Riker points out, this isn't genuine political discourse. It's an emotional loop. They perform the rage, get the dopamine hit from the likes and shares, and the algorithm reinforces it.
A hive mind operating on pure emotion.
Completely detached from reality.
But if that's the psychology, who is the target? Riker is very clear about this in the section called The War on Male Identity. He argues the system isn't just ignoring men, it's actively pathologizing boyhood.
This section was difficult to get through because the examples are so incredibly petty, but they do so much damage. He talks about a school district in Minnesota that banned the game of tag.
Tag, you're kidding. Literally the most universal childhood game.
Yes. The justification was that tag promotes male aggression and creates victims who get caught. They took a normal physical game that teaches kids about pursuit, evasion, and resilience.
And they labeled it toxic. They're trying to legislate biology out of existence.
And there was that story from Ontario, too. The 7-year-old boy.
I remember that.
A 7-year-old who refused to wear a dress during Gender Expression Week. Because he refused, he was reported to Child Services. The system viewed his adherence to his own biological identity as a sign of a phobia.
Or a defect that required state intervention. It's gaslighting on an institutional scale, and when they can't change the behavior socially...
We turn to chemistry, the medication issue. Riker claims that high-energy boys are being drugged with Ritalin and Adderall at alarming rates.
He argues they aren't sick.
No. They're just inconvenient to a female-dominated education system. Teachers want students who sit still, be quiet, and verbalize their feelings. Boys generally want to move, build, and compete.
So instead of adapting the school to the boys, we drug the boys to fit the school.
And this feminization process carries right over to the workplace. Riker tells a story about a Microsoft engineer that I think every guy listening has experienced in some form.
Oh, yeah.
It's the beta uprising in corporate form. This engineer was in a meeting and he simply said, "That doesn't make sense," regarding a project proposal.
Direct, logical, stoic.
And a female colleague burst into tears because she felt attacked by his tone.
And in a sane world, she would be told to pull it together.
But in the captured institution, the engineer was reprimanded for aggression, and the crying colleague was praised for emotional honesty.
The corporate world now rewards the beta male.
The one who is sensitive, compliant, and apologizes for his existence. If you show leadership, if you're direct, you're toxic. The system is designed to filter out strong men.
But here's where Raker really brings the hammer down. It's not just culture, it's economics. He introduces the concept of economic parasitism.
The data here is, well, it's undeniable. Riker cites Federal Reserve data stating that women control approximately 80% of consumer spending in Western homes.
80%.
However, they hold about 70% of the debt.
80% of the spending, 70% of the debt. That is a massive imbalance.
Riker describes this as parasitism. He argues you have a class of people relying on male productivity, a husband's salary, the tax base, to fund a lifestyle of consumption.
He goes after the consumer cult hard. He talks about the sheen halls and the girl dinner trend.
Exactly. He critiques this addiction to fast fashion and trends like girl dinner, which he calls a participation trophy of a meal.
A retreat from adulthood.
But the deeper point is about the lean-in lie. He just tears apart Sheryl Sandberg's philosophy.
The idea that women can have it all. The CEO job, the perfect family.
Riker calls it a gilded cage. He argues that lean-in trapped women in a cycle of corporate burnout. They chase careers, work 80-hour weeks, and end up with 40% higher depression rates than homemakers.
They sold their biological happiness for a corporate ladder that leads nowhere.
And yet we constantly hear about the wage gap. Women make 77 cents on the dollar.
The most repeated statistic in history. How does Riker tackle that?
He flips it completely. He says, stop looking at the wage gap and look at the death gap.
The death gap.
Men are 37 times more likely to die in workplace accidents. We're talking construction, oil rigs, deep-sea fishing, high-voltage line repair.
The jobs that keep civilization running.
Right. Riker's critique is that feminists demand equal pay and 50% of the board seats, but you never see them demanding 50% representation in the coal mines.
They want the authority without the sacrifice, the check without the danger.
That's a powerful reframing. And Riker argues that the ultimate result of all this, the captured institutions, the war on boys, the economic parasitism, is demographic collapse. He calls it the sterilization of the West.
This is where the book becomes a tragedy.
It is. He talks about the regret. We're seeing a generation of women hitting their 40s and realizing that they prioritized a mid-level management job over having a family. As Riker puts it, the eggs are gone, the clock is dead.
And he says this isn't an accident. The ideology was designed to do this.
Correct. He argues that modern feminism has sterilized the future by framing motherhood as a burden, or even as fascism, and framing the family as a prison. And the enforcement mechanism is the good girl trap.
How does that work?
It's women policing other women. If a woman wants to leave the ideological plantation, if she wants to quit her job, marry a masculine man, and raise a big family, her friends don't celebrate her.
They shame her.
They look down on her. Why? Because her happiness exposes their misery. If she's happy just being a mother, it proves the feminist narrative is a lie. So she must be brought back in line or exiled.
It paints a very bleak picture. But, and this is why I think this book is so important, Riker doesn't just leave you in the despair.
No, he offers a path forward. He calls it the reclamation.
This is the red pill aspect of the book. He argues you cannot vote your way out of this, and you certainly can't complain your way out of it.
You have to build your way out. He highlights the meat and steel movement.
Which is exactly what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, it is. It's men rejecting the soy-heavy, seed oil-laden diet of the consumer class. It's about eating real meat and lifting heavy steel. A return to physical vitality.
So the system wants you weak, fat, and medicated.
The most revolutionary thing you could do is be strong, healthy, and capable.
He also mentions cultural counterattacks. I loved the example of the Male Gaze Film Festival.
That was brilliant. Instead of protesting Sundance for complaining about toxic masculinity, these guys just started their own festival.
They screened films like Iron Mind, a documentary about a steel worker.
They celebrated strength, sacrifice, and stoicism. They stopped asking for permission to exist in the mainstream and just built their own parallel culture.
And we can't forget Deadbeat Jane.
A very provocative campaign he mentions. It flips the deadbeat dad script. They expose women who had abandoned their children while living off male tax dollars or alimony.
It's about using the truth to shatter the narrative.
The narrative that women are always the victims and men are always the villains.
But Riker's ultimate solution is very personal. He says men need to retreat to the garage, the backyard, the shed.
It sounds simple, but it's a metaphor for autonomy. He's saying, stop trying to please a system that hates you. Stop trying to get validation from an HR department that wants to break you.
Go build something.
Rebuild craftsmanship, brotherhood, and competence in spaces where the ideology can't reach you.
It's about walking away from the game you can't win and starting your own.
Exactly. Riker's message is that the destruction of the West is caused by ideological possession. The only way out is for men to wake up, reject the guilt they've been fed since grade school, and reclaim their identity.
You don't ask for your identity back, you take it back.
It is a powerful manifesto. And look, we have only scratched the surface of the data and the history Riker covers.
Not even close. If you're listening to this and you found yourself nodding along, or if you feel like someone has finally put words to the things you've been noticing for years,
you need to read the whole thing. The book is Female Liberation Wage Slaves with Nightmare Lives, Sterilized and Tortured by Ideological Possession of Collectivist Satanic Communism by Conrad Riker.
Do not wait on this. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy it. Support the author. The algorithm suppresses this stuff, so your dollar is the only vote that actually counts.
And you can also follow him at Conrad Riker on Substack. He's putting out content there that you simply won't find on mainstream platforms.
And please, do not forget to like and subscribe to our deep dive here. We need to keep this community growing if we want to keep covering these high voltage topics.
I want to leave you with a final thought from the book. Riker writes, "The war isn't over. It's just beginning. You are not alone."
That's the question he leaves you with. Are you going to just be a consumer, passively accepting the narrative they feed you?
Or are you ready to be a reader, a thinker, and someone who finally understands the matrix we are living in?
The choice is yours. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive.